Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, where we are recapping some of the most notable premieres from the 2025 Sundance Film Festival. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, joined by my co-host, Arturo Zarita, and laying down the track, it's Amanda the Jedi. We're talking about the film Train Dreams. Train Dreams is a story about Robert, a railway layer and logger at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century in the American Northwest. Robert spends prolonged periods of time at work, away from his wife and their young daughter, and struggles to make sense of the rapidly changing world around him. Train Dreams is written and directed by Clint Bentley, whose previous film Jockey was part of the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. Bentley co-wrote the film with his filmmaking partner Greg Kwedar, the director of Oscar nominee Sing Sing. The movie also stars Joel Edgerton, Felicity Jones, Kerry Condon, and William H. Macy, and Train Dreams was sold to Netflix shortly after its premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. Amanda, what was your reaction to watching Train Dreams?
I just thought it was this like beautiful and somber, and I get that. I know the premise says it's unique and universal, but that really is just what it ends up feeling like. It's like, I don't know what it's like to be a laborer going away for months on end, building railroad tracks in the, in the early 1900s.
But now you feel like you do?
But like literally more than 100 years ago. But it's not that I feel like I can. It's just like more the different beats of life that he ends up going through, the different ways he has to deal with things, and the world changing and what that feels like to see, and it makes it feel really lived in, that you can like really understand this person's perspective. And it's interesting when like you have these shots of how isolated and how kind of old timey parts of it feels, and then it cuts to him visiting the city much later in his life, and like how much time has actually passed that he's just kind of staying completely out of in a lot of ways. I don't know. I was just really, really moved by it. As somber and sad as some of it ends up getting, there are these moments of like beauty and just like experience that he gets that's really nice. Like, I know sometimes the word Americana is thrown around too much, but it honestly feels like this festival probably had 3 movies that fit into this weird like landscape of a changing Americana throughout like the past century. Right. And this one is kind of like as far back as we end up going. But that's really just kind of what it feels like. I really loved it. Joel is fantastic in this. You end up with these characters that you hope are going to be very impactful or in the story for a long time, but they're just moments in his life. And sometimes that's hard to reckon with, or you're hoping for maybe a more cinematic aspect to certain character introductions, and then it just kind of goes the way that so much of life actually does, which I thought was really telling. I'm about halfway through the novella right now. I just haven't had time to sit down and finish it, and it's pretty spot on. I think they've done a really good job kind of like actualizing that to the screen.
Yeah, it's based on that Dennis Johnson book. And I would guess just from the feel of it that there's probably entire like sentences lifted from the novella and put in the mouth of the narrator. And I think that lends this film a real kind of like lyrical kind of quality, a real writerly quality, and what I would say is a really positive way. You mentioned that whole idea about it being this like look at a whole life, and there's this really incredible thing that the film does, in which through like brief montage or the narrator just making allusion to things, it'll refer to instances happening, like 20 years in the future or 20 years in the past of this character's life, and make it all feel like part of this journey. Like the approach to this film and the film I'm about to compare it to are completely different, but I was reminded a little bit of Boyhood, just in the way that like,
oh, you did tell me that. Yeah.
It's like sort of trying to give you like a picture of a life through these like glimpses over the years. And whereas Boyhood is really just like, every year for 16 years. And this has a much wider scope, but also like not as into the like nitty gritty of certain parts. I still just felt like overwhelmed by the sense that I had just experienced in a person's like entire arc in this really beautiful way.
Yeah. It was one that we ended up catching in theaters, at the Ray Theater, one of the best ones. Definitely worth it for its visuals. and for the sound
Yeah.
and for that experience. It ended up getting pulled. It was online, surprisingly.
I was going to say the second Netflix picked it up.
As a premiere, yeah.
Gone.
But it was definitely worth catching it in theaters, only for all of us to come out and see that it was picked up by Netflix, which is a double-edged sword. It's cool that it will be seen. But will it be seen in the best way possible? I really don't know.
No, sorry.
I agree with everything all of y'all have said. I love these creatives because they are always taking turns. One produces and writes while the other one directs, and then they'll switch off. They did that for Sing Sing. This, I believe they also did it for the Sundance one, Jockey. But this, like, we came out of it, Alina and I, we were like, 100 years ago, this is the millennial turning of the century person where
Literally.
everything you knew, right? Like, you're building the stuff only for technology to come and surpass
Make it useless.
It is an incredible story of what it feels like to be a person who's stuck between two ages, something that we have been going through with this turn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was a
and
great
it's
way
a,
of
it's a
capturing it.
really interesting perspective on this period of history, because I feel like, you know, we've had stories that maybe cover this era of history, but it's so like individual in its perspective. Like, it really is about being a small cog with a big world around changing around
Yeah.
you. And just the way that he, you know, this movie is able to articulate the world changing and your place becoming questionable because you didn't, you know, you're not used to the new experiences. I found it to be really, really fascinating and just transporting in a way that historical pieces like this aren't always transporting. And just to take it back to what you were saying a bit about the sound, like, it has this really sweeping, beautiful kind of score throughout that just gives the whole thing a really poetic feel. I don't know, like, poetic is one of those words that maybe sometimes doesn't really have much meaning, but there is something that is so like song-like about the assembly here. It really gives you this vivid picture of different periods of this guy's life. I don't know. I was really transfixed with the movie. It's shot quite beautifully. The cinematographer, Adolfo Veloso, also worked with Clint Bentley on his previous film, but I think their work here is just like so remarkable. It's shot, I want to say it was like in a 3:2 ratio, and you get like the enormity of the like tall redwood trees in the Pacific Northwest.
It's the best way to capture it.
Crazy.
Some really incredible shots, and it just like everything kind of felt so painterly in their assembly too.
It really did.
Is there a better shot movie? I think it's the best cinematography of Sundance.
Of the festival, it's hard to think of one that's necessarily better.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is beautiful. There are some the silhouettes on people. It's stunning.
It's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm giving it my stamp. Best cinematography of the festival. I don't think it's even
just
close.
like
I think so.
Some of the shots of like Joel Edgerton and Felicity Jones like cuddled up by the riverside are so gorgeous.
And there's like a shot of his cabin towards the end. That there's another movie, Rabbit Trap, kind of has some similar imagery because so much of it is also taking place outside in like again like a Welsh woodly area. But this, like, I just felt like it just felt more rich. Like, there was a lot more depth to the shots, and there was a lot more like variance to the different shots.
And the color.
The color was really like
exquisite,
vibrant.
especially if they're filming outside.
Yeah, it's hard
impressive.
to do. Yeah.
And you were telling me that the cinematographer would have done Jockey. Is that the one? Oh, I mean, and Jockey was like you're following horses. So maybe the trees were a little bit easier to capture, and they captured the hell out of it.
Just, they really did.
Beautiful looking film. Some theaters will host it because Netflix does do that push and pull.
If they want to make
not
it
AMC's,
If they plan to put it in the Oscars, it'll get at least some kind of limited run.
Yeah, I mean,
They
this
could push
is at least thus far the only film that Netflix has picked up out of Sundance, which at least to me would indicate that they might have plans to give it some kind of run. It's not necessarily like a splashy film, and not one that I would like pencil in for Best Picture necessarily, but like some of those craft awards are certainly up
easily
because it's such a beautiful looking movie.
I wouldn't be upset with Best Picture though.
I wouldn't either. And I was also going to say, like, I think this is one of the best performances I've seen from Joel Edgerton because I think it really gets the thing that he can do well is like that really internal, like smoldering kind of
Tom
A lot with
Hardy.
his eyes. A lot with his eyes.
a lot with his eyes, and a lot with just his like posture.
Yes.
Like the less he gives you, the more he gives you in a way, and that is such a great match for this type of character as well. And I think it's just like one of the strongest performances that he's probably given.
I was literally just gonna say, I feel like I've seen him in a couple movies over like a few different festivals actually, where he's kind of given the performance, but the movie hasn't been in service of the performance, or at least not enough in service of the performance. I think something like The Stranger or something that was at Cannes a couple years ago, or TIFF or something. But this finally feels like he got the project that both lets him like do the work and have it actually feel like it means something at the end of the day. Like it really, yeah. So.
You mean Master Gardener didn't do it for y'all when he was?
Dude, I didn't even see it.
Hey, bless your soul. That is not a movie for you. I can promise you that. That goes places.
Isn't that Oscar Isaac?
No, Master Gardener is something completely
yeah.
different.
I'm thinking
Card Counter
something.
is.
Yeah, I'm thinking Card Counter.
Card Counter is
Master-
good.
Yeah,
No,
both
yeah.
Schrader
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah,
Right.
hey, do
Master
yourself
Gardener.
not a
favor,
favor.
just-
Search up the wiki and just imagine what would have happened if you saw that at, what was it, New York Film Festival at 5 in the morning?
Yeah. Yep.
Look, I'm a big fan of Joel.
Yeah.
But I even saw the Joel haters come out going, I was wrong. He's pretty
was
good here. He is fantastic without saying much. You really feel just what he goes through, all of the emotions as he's going through his job, seeing the world go around him. I thought he killed it completely.
Yeah.
I don't remember Casey Affleck being producer on this before going into the fest, but if he's on it, I don't know. I have a bit more confidence they could push the movie.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. We're kind of also there is an aspect to it that kind of pushes it into a realm of like what this person's kind of reckoning within themselves too. Like there's something that happens early on that then kind of like paints the way he's viewing the rest of his life and everything that happens in his life. And that's like a really interesting aspect to it too. So I do think it's doing more than just like showing us, not that even if it was just showing us the span of someone's life, that would be more than enough. But it's just like there is like some framing in here that's interesting and kind of sets it apart from other things that might have the same definition. I can't imagine going into this and not being surprised by some of what happens. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. And a quick shout out also for William H. Macy. Of all the supporting performances, like he is just so delightful in this film.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
In a bit of a different performance that I'm used to from seeing from him. Definitely like showing some age in a bit of a cantankerous kind of performance, but such a delight. He's so great in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, a really great movie, and definitely just hope that Netflix, as we said, gives this like a nice theatrical run of sorts so that people get to experience the picture and sound in the best way possible.
It does seem a little bit more like something they'll put effort into pushing.
Yeah, because it's a very patient film, and watching that at home, the worst thing that could happen is someone getting distracted or moving away, as opposed to seeing it in a theater at its full peak and being able to go along with the story. You know, at 102 minutes, I don't feel it's long, but it's the right amount of time for the journey that he's going through. So
I agreed.
Yeah, it doesn't have like the most driven plot, but like you said, it is only
That's why
102
Boyhood
minutes.
was a good comparison.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it is just kind of like almost a vibe movie in some ways. And it based on a novella. So like it doesn't feel really laborious and overlong.
Yeah.
But it is still like profound and pretty beautifully assembled. Like this one quite a bit. I don't know if anybody has any final thoughts on Train Dreams.
If you can catch it in a theater, do so.
Yeah.
It may not be an AMC, but it's definitely worth it.
Definitely. That's Arturo Zurita. We also got Amanda the Jedi. I'm Zach Shevich. This is the Intercut podcast. We are covering a bunch of movies out of the Sundance Film Festival and more if you stay tuned with this channel. That's all for this review. And until next time, the war don't stop needing spruce just because we've had a bad day.